Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday and a very casual Christmas Eve. This is Seattle Now. Well, we've almost made it through 2020. It's been a heck of a year, and we're all probably just a little busted. We're keeping things chill for the holiday, celebrating Friday on a Thursday this week. In a minute, KUOW's Zaki Hamid and Casey Martin are here to help us process 2020 as we head into 2021. But first, let's get you caught up. Governor Inslee has extended the state's eviction ban for another 3 months. The moratorium was going to expire next week, but the governor yesterday said it will stay in place through the end of March. That makes a full year that the pandemic-related protection will have kept tenants from losing shelter. The governor's office says it will have more details next week. Congressman Rick Larsen says he's symptom-free, but he'll be quarantining now that he has coronavirus. The Everett Democrat says he tested positive for COVID-19 on Tuesday. Larsen says he'll still be able to vote on any legislation that comes up in the coming days. And Capitol Hill's Cal Anderson Park is back open after 6 months. It all started with protesters marching against police violence and ended with last week's sweep of a tent encampment. The city says crews hauled away 100 tons of debris and furniture, but they're still working on repairs to the shelter house. Parks says down the line, they'll restore the water fountain and install new art. It's the weirdest holiday season ever. Santa is in a bubble and Hanukkah was over Zoom. Now Christmas is upon us. Time for the big show. The big, weird, COVID isolated Christmas show. The only thing I can guarantee is that I will be next to my fireplace, doubling down on warmth and quiet. Zaki Hamid is here. Zaki, how are you going to keep it cozy on Christmas?
Movies, fireplace, and some booze.
All right. That sounds right. That sounds like a good solid mix. Casey Martin is here as well. Casey, what's your Christmas morning ritual?
Christmas morning, I have some stolen bread. I don't know if you're familiar with the bread, but some stolen. And some eggnog in the coffee. And I got to be with Zeki on that. Probably some spicing up the coffee this Christmas morning for sure.
And, you know, it's been such a weird year. This is our last Casual Friday of 2020. Of course, as we just talked about, dominated by the pandemic. Casey, remember the early days of the pandemic when we were here in Seattle and we were the epicenter and nobody was allowed to touch their face? And it was like this incredible breaking news story. And you, of course, were out there at Life Care.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was just looking back at photos from spring, from April and March when we were just going out to Life Care, and it's so funny to see packed into reporters, and none of us are wearing masks. Everything. It's just so different. Everything has changed wildly. And at the time, Gil, one of our editors who retired this year, he was saying, we just don't know anything about this yet. Maybe just keep your distance, try to stay down, upwind from people, stuff like that. And we were like, oh, Gil, you're being too cautious, whatever. Cut to like a week later, I'm there with a full mask, a 10-foot boom pole, gloves. And, reporters who were actually covered Life Care got infected, got sick from being right outside. Mm-hmm. So It was wild. It was so weird that it just happened. First there was that first case up north, and then Life Care right across the lake from KUOW.
Zeki, what do you remember from the early days of the pandemic?
I remember at work when they were like, "We're gonna go home until the end of March, and then we'll see what happens from there." So I remember that. I remember the schools shut down also until the end of March. We're like, "Wow, 2 whole weeks at home. Yes. Let's see what this happens." And here we are in December. I mean, the thing is, one thing that keeps sticking in my mind is there's this line that that Hamlet says to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, where he says, "For there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." So to that, I say, lies. It's all a bunch of lies. I tried that. It didn't work. There's a pandemic going on.
Totally. Casey, what's never going to be the same about you?
I saw a TikTok the other day where somebody says, will we ever bowl again? Like, imagine like picking up a random bowling ball, putting your fingers in the bowling ball, and then like sitting down and eating. And it's like, oh yeah, I've done that for years. I don't think we'll do that kind of stuff anymore. So I just think like our semblance of going back to normal, I think will kind of still change a little bit. I don't know.
We may never shake hands again.
Yeah, like there's a lot of that. I think just
Definitely.
a lot of the personal stuff. Yeah.
Another big moment for the city this year was when the George Floyd protests erupted here locally. The protest accompanied by, of course, the Capitol Hill Occupied protest, also known as CHOP. A lot of attention nationally and locally. Casey, you were there for the so-called, Summer of Love, as Mayor Jenny Durkin called it, before she recanted that comment. What stood out to you from the protests against police violence this year?
I remember talking to you, Murph, from the center of all that, 11th and Pine, and what was so interesting, what was unprecedented, was that we've seen protests, we've seen standoffs before, but this was an occupation. This was where people had set up. I think that people were kind of taken off guard that this was very, very peaceful. It wasn't like protesters, again, broke into the precinct and tried to burn it down, but just kind of stayed there, kind of, held the space. And that was wild. That was just like, how long are they going to stay? And everybody kept asking, like, how long do you think they're going to stay? And I kept saying, like, until they clear them out, until the cops showed up. So.
Which is what ended up happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Zeki, do you think we'll look back on this moment as a turning point for Seattle, or I don't know?
Ooh. Early on, I got to say that I was hopeful that the rest of the world will finally listen to what Black folks have been telling us for decades, right? I mean, if you just listen to the lyrics of like The Message by Grandmaster Flash, you're going to see it's the same thing. We're talking about the same stuff. And in a way, I'm still hopeful that, these protests are going to get us to where we need to go, which is a society that is anti-racist. But it has to have sustained work from everybody, individuals, and especially from institutions. And I don't know if we have it in us to go to where we need to go right now. So it's a big question, but the biggest thing for me, at least people started acknowledging what Black folks have been telling us for decades.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of us, but some of us at least.
Is there any silver lining for you two about how we're celebrating this year?
Oh, yeah.
Honestly?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have to go anywhere. That's kind of nice in a way, right? Like I can stay in my pajamas for, all day long and stuff like that. I mean, not that I mind it. I like going out and everything, but there's something about, just chilling out and watching movies and not doing anything. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish we could get a little snow. That would be fun.
Yeah, beautiful. 2 nights ago. Yeah. I had the toboggan out, my scarf. I was ready. For the big one. But it started raining, of course, by the time I had even got to the top of the sled hill. So, but we'll get some. I think January and February. I think that's when we hit our stride for sure.
My kid went out and did my kid was so desperate for snow, she just went out and built like the tiniest little snowman and did some, snow angels like in the slush and then came back in.
Yeah, that's the way we do it in the city.
Right.
For sure. We got to talk about one more thing before we go, because of course 2020 has been a doozy. What is your most hopeful moment of 2020? Casey, what did you see this year in your reporting that reaffirmed your faith in humanity a little bit?
Not to get too sappy, but I think about a lot of the journalists. I think that we had to interpret so much that what was going on around the world, whether it was New Zealand or Australia or the UK or right here at LifeCare, was people going out covering this kind of stuff, getting these stories. And a lot of the journalism that was not about the pandemic and, was escapism. But, it was a tough year for local journalism. And frankly, I consumed a lot of news this year, I think, with a lot of other folks. So I'm grateful that, for the journalists that were able to, report through this year, were, able to stay safe, stay employed, and provide us with a lot of essential news.
Support your local news orgs, because truly, you were out there, Casey. I thought about you a lot. I thought about our colleagues a lot. Zeki, what about you?
There's this group called Support the ID that started as to support businesses in the International District. And they started this big fundraiser. And what they did with the money is every week they took a bunch of money, went to a local restaurant, bought a bunch of food, and took it to some essential workers like hospital workers, nurses, and doctors. And they did that for, I don't know, for a while there. But I thought that was just such an amazing story about people supporting each other. Amidst all the chaos, there are some really nice stories out there of people just sticking their neck out and helping each other out. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I see the same thing up here in the North End in my Pinehurst Facebook group. Shout out to the Pinehurst Buy Nothing Facebook group for real, because there's a lot of need in the North End, and I rarely see someone whose need is not met, whether it's we need dinner tonight, can you help us out, or, where can I get legal advice? And the fact that we are all just doing little bits to ameliorate some of this for people is so meaningful right now, And I appreciate you too, and I appreciate you being on our show, always.
Yeah, thank you. This is awesome. You're awesome.
That's our show for this week. Thanks again to my guest, Casey Martin, who's a reporter here at KUOW, and Zaki Hamid. He's the Director of Community Engagement at KUOW. Thanks, you two.
Thanks, Trish, and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much.
Have a great holiday. Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. The show is produced by Matt Martin, Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Sophie Reed, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. Have a great holiday. As this memorable year comes to an end, it's good to know we got through it together. KUOW has been able to bring you programming that broadens your perspective, thanks to our members who step up to support this work. If KUOW has been there for you at some point in the past year, consider making a financial gift to ensure a new year of telling important stories about our community. Use the link in our description to make your gift today. And thanks.